And we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to Civil Offense. My name is Ahmed Mlih, the last libertarian podcast known to mankind. And by that, I mean last created, not last to exist, because today I'm joined by two gentlemen who are part of a vast amount of libertarian podcast library, but they were the ones I invited out of all of the libertarian people in the libertarian sphere because they have, again, such a vast library, and the kinds of discussions they have definitely stand out to me. I'm joined by Zach and Andrew of the Legacy Right. How's it going, guys?
Not bad.
Welcome in.
All right. I guess individually, if you want to introduce yourselves.
I'm Andrew Joseph. We've been doing this for about a year and trying to grow every day.
I am the legacy of Jennifer Ant Kisor. I am Zachary Kisor, and like Andrew said, we've been doing this for about a year, going on 2, and we just keep moving along. So, trying to figure things out. What more are we gonna talk about and get into?
Right. And for tonight's announcements, I did want to say that the thing I would be announcing, I announced it on my Discord server before, but I plan to make this as my main announcement for the show just because, like, as of today, Ross Ulbricht has spent 3,720 days in prison over 10 years for creating an e-commerce website. Both items deemed legal and illegal by the state, such as drugs, were sold, but anything involuntary that could harm a third party was prohibited. So I'd say right now, if you're a viewer of the show, go to freeross.org/action to support Ross as this Christmas approaches. I'm not a sponsor or anything, but I recommend donating to Ross's commissary and or sending him a letter of support, especially, again, because it's that season. Nothing you wouldn't want cops or feds reading, honestly, because, they might read through it without you knowing. I don't know. You know how it goes. Don't put, anything crazy or, to us normal, but to the state, something arrestable or something that would get Ross in trouble. I don't know, any of that. Don't do that. But I encourage anyone listening to contribute what you can, whether that be commissary, a letter, anything that is contributing. Because it's really not easy to be thrown in a cage for 10 years. But being that cage really is just where you're told you'll spend the rest of your life. Something like that has to be even harder than just being put in a cage for 10 years. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the announcements. With that being said, we will get to the show. We will talk against, the oppression that the state has placed on societies. And that is kind of why we're here in the first place. It ties right back into that. But you guys, you just mentioned, you do your own show. You've been at it for about 2 years now. But is there anything else you want to talk about just as far as the subject matter of your show? Kind of like, what kind of conversations you guys have? I know you have a description up, but I think maybe you guys could probably encapsulate that better right now.
Speaking of agorism, actually, because that's one of the main things that we try to touch base on, because we're fascinated with it, kind of fascinated with the concept that maybe it's a good co-regulator with the term ANCAP. But speaking of agorism and Ross Ulbricht, free Ross, by the way, look what he did. 10 years ago. With the Silk Road. That's agorism in practice right there. Opening up a marketplace, subverting the government and the overt market, and just finding your own niche. And yeah, everything was on there, from drugs to prostitutes to guns to, I don't know, what was there? Was there farm goods on there? Probably. Wouldn't be surprised if it was a marketplace. But
Yeah.
still, that's agorism.
And that's the real land of the free.
Mm-hmm.
Not America. Honestly, it's not as if that disappeared. Yes, Silk Road itself is no longer something you can actually buy stuff on, got shut down. But, the black markets online are still there if you go to Tor browser, if you search for it. I'm not saying to do it, but I'm saying the exact services and even better at this point are available just disgustingly for people to purchase these days. I don't even know why that would be the case. It's disgusting what people do with their free time and money and with their freedoms. I think that's why we need to suppress them. But yeah, I guess, you brought up like agorism as a co-regulator to an anarcho-capitalism. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know, Andrew, you could probably explain this better than I.
Well, we think about it this way as like a way to filter. People have different views about social pollution. This is right, this is wrong. I'm a Christian. I don't believe in sinning, and I don't. So let them go like they used to do in Cuba. They go to gamble in Cuba and stuff like that. People do drugs. They don't like drugs, so they okay, we'll go here. That'd be in their neighborhood, not my neighborhood. If you do that in my neighborhood, you're going to get hurt because this is not what we do. This. A lot of people say we don't do this in America, but they do that over in Europe. Okay, well, it doesn't have to be so far away. It could be next state over, next town over, but it doesn't happen here, but it can happen there. Just leave us alone. Let us live our life as we want to. And if we want to associate with stuff like that, we can associate with stuff like that.
So you're almost saying that like there would be at a certain point a prohibition of what people can do, like, depending on where you're at. Is that something you're saying, like, property owners are regulating what sort of activity happens, in their area, like somehow?
It's a conversation. So if you want to contribute to that type of conversation, that can be in that kind of neighborhood. It doesn't have to be in my kind of neighborhood.
Well, your conversation, but when it comes to like agorism, for example, like let's say somebody sells somebody weed, like are you saying basically like I don't want that happening in the house next to me, so therefore I'm gonna like homestead more houses in my area, or have more people homestead near me?
Yeah, you're paying for the experience and not having to deal with that, but you can also have people that want to pay for that kind of experience. It's just why it's a marketplace.
Well, I suppose what I'm trying to understand is essentially what the co-regulation aspect of it is, like in detail, sort of like what exactly are you saying the anarcho-capitalism is doing to regulate the agorism?
Well, they're distributed. It's different areas. They're strained out. Like I said, that if people want to live in that particular environment, they have the right to do so. If they want to go down to a coffee shop and smoke pot, they have the right to do that. But that should be a part of the community and the conversation that they're having as a community.
Yeah, well, okay. So first of all, I guess I would want to define agorism. It is a methodology in which basically like it is describing what actions will and will not subvert the state. So basically it would be gray and black market action. And in a free society, which I assume is what we're discussing when you're talking about, how they would co-regulate each other. I assume you're saying once the state has been is gone. But basically at that point, I guess, like everything would really be black market activity at that point. There would be no such white market activity that would be regulated by the state. So I'm kind of confused on here is exactly like what activity is necessarily regulated by anarcho-capitalism. Is there some sort of like, are you almost saying like it's a private law society in which, this is what you can do here, this is what you can't do here?
For the most part.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say, I don't know, because like I think agorism, what's good about it is it helps, identify what sorts of things are still status mechanisms, what things aren't. I would say it would be a problem if you had something like, let's say, law enforcement or prisons, like, systems like that. I don't know exactly what you would be okay with or not okay with when it comes to a private law society.
Yeah. Well, you would have these insurance companies that, it would be part of the community. This is allowed. This isn't allowed. If you want to do this, we have alternative insurance contracts. Most businesses have, sub businesses that to cater to other people that aren't able to reach at that level, right? So that they would be able to distribute who wants to do what where.
It's a little funny because it's almost as if the insurance companies would create their own white market by doing something like that. It would almost be a mechanism in a sense that could be subverted by engaging in black market activity, and it could just kind of create that cycle again.
And then you're back doing the same thing. So which right. I mean, maybe that's the pattern that we're supposed to. I don't know. That's the pattern we're supposed to live with, but the goal is to obviously erase the white market, erase the state. Don't.
Well, you say white market, but I see it as more like people trying to purchase purity.
How so?
Well, like, say somebody, they want that 50s vibe, right? It's 2.5 kids. They want a safe neighborhood and stuff like that. So they're gonna try to pay for that to get that level of access and guarantee compared to other people
They want
who are
that.
more main. Sorry.
And they want that perfect little home with that dog and the wife, the two kids. I mean, they want perfection. So you got those everybody that wants to chase that white market dream, I guess. That American dream.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like, I guess people can still have that life. They can have it essentially by homesteading land, and housing prices would be a lot cheaper because you wouldn't have the property titles that the state holds currently. You wouldn't have these land holding firms. So you wouldn't really have a housing market in the sense that like it's enforced of a standard that like, there are such things as property values. You'd have the housing market in the sense that like I build a house here, I value it at this price because I've built it. I decide the price, I decide where I build. There's no real like sort of limitation on where it can build so long as the resources are not claimed. And I mean, you can't really I know this is a debate within libertarianism, and I know it's probably more controversial. I'm on the more controversial end of it. I don't really think you could like demonstrate that you've claimed land, like that you've homesteaded the land itself, unless you build something on it. But then what about like the patch of land outside of that? You can't really demonstrate that you've claimed the land itself. Like, I don't think mowing grass would count as claiming land. I don't think even if you built a fence around land, you'd really just own the fence, not really the land within it automatically, because you haven't really homesteaded it. So I kind of find it hard, within the actual like libertarian, what counts as libertarian homesteading, like as far as ethical claims go, I kind of find it hard to sort of ethically set up a community in which, rules are enforced.
Andrew?
Well, sorry.
It's all good.
I mean, I would probably say how rules are enforced is based upon, I don't know, the contractual obligation that you'll be able to you'll typically make in order to figure out who owns this or who works this. I mean, maybe you have a contractual agreement with somebody to work your land, or provide your fence, or make sure, or you have a neighbor that you cooperate with, and you want to make sure, hey, this is where I'm working, this is where I'm homesteading, this is my domain, that's yours. Just a single cooperation. So, I mean, I would take it onto a more of a contract base. Andrew, you said an insurance mechanism where you have competing private insurances. So the idea would be, in order to enforce certain issues, specifically when it comes to property title, would be on the basis of insurance enforcement. So you'd have a policy that you'd have an adjuster come in, investigate, basically same old, like you see nowadays with your insurance claims. But you would file that claim, and somebody would come and check it out, investigate, see what's going down. I mean, see if this is something to truly follow through, or should it be dismissed. I mean, and then so on and so forth with property being that it's your claim. I mean, it's essentially based upon how you articulate your ruling for the most part. And I know, I mean, statists are going to say, well, that's chaos. What's not chaos? But it would be relatively subjective on your own individual mind. But then it could also be very straightforward on the enforcement of insurance practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things there. First of all, with the insurance part of it, I don't think you'd really see really insurance costing, especially not as much as it would now. But like if people were to use insurance, I think it would be almost like, it would be pretty much, if it exists, pretty much very cheap, but also just the idea of it being like, something that's kind of necessary. I don't think people would see as much, just because of like how little they would actually have to spend when it comes to, even setting up their home in the first place. Like, to say like your car and your home all need to be insured is really something like a product of the fact that like has been made more challenging than it should be to be able to purchase a car or a home, or even like set one up yourself, like as far as a home goes. what was the other thing? You were talking about insurance claims. I'm trying to think of the enforcement. I guess one point would be the actual enforcement of insurance agencies, I think would need to be addressed, especially, if you're looking to meet the condition of freedom, just because these agencies, assuming they're, these large entities that have the ability to enforce law or, have these like sweeping powers that they say they have, pretty much people could just pay each other, or pay these agencies, to just like enforce things onto each other that aren't necessarily something you agree with, or that aren't valid ethically. So I could basically say, I want my insurance company to arrest you because you're selling weed, and you don't really have a defense against that other than pure might. So if the insurance company outmights you, then I've essentially just created another status mechanism there, and I've kind of just had them enforce that. And the problem with it kind of just becomes that if they have this ability to do it without people being able to subvert it, they could sort of just meld together and become a bigger insurance agency. And I know, the libertarian defense against that is, well, there's no monopolies, there's no organic monopolies. But the problem with that is that when it comes to force, if you just start putting all your force together, well, then it's not really a free market anymore. So you're not having a natural monopoly occur. There is literally a forceful suppression of the market, just as the state has done before.
So competition may not necessarily matter when it comes to insurance then, from what you're saying then. So maybe it would be relatively cheaper, but I don't know. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, when a community has a reputation and they've upheld it for a long time, and then somebody comes in who's affluent and young and arrogant, and they start damaging and tarnishing that reputation, how can you address that situation without direct intervention? Like say like I was saying before, like the marijuana thing. When I was living in Knoxville a couple years ago, I was doing security, and I would do security up to higher class apartments and stuff like that, and they would get constant complaints about people who were smoking marijuana. That's just ignored now, but in the future, people, if they're paying a legitimate premium so that they're not exposed to that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with marijuana. I'm just saying other people who will have legitimate concerns about that don't want to be exposed to it. How can you deal with that without direct force besides pressuring them to leave?
So would you say, I guess in counter to that, do you think that there should be severe penalties for any sort of pollution whatsoever? Because essentially the marijuana smoke is a pollution of its own. So let's say that somebody has some sort of not necessarily even a factory, but somebody has some sort of machine that's emitting fumes, and you can smell the fumes every once in a while. Do you have a right to tell this person to shut this machine down? Because I would say at that point, that almost just becomes regulatory enforcement of climate action.
No, I think social pressure and making it obvious that people are uncomfortable about it would probably be a more significant influence than telling you we're not comfortable with you doing that. Either stop or leave would be better than direct violence and force.
Oh, you're saying basically what other option would people see as most preferable other than that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there might be people that see that as the most preferable thing to do. The ethical standards being the ethical standards does not make it so that people are bound to act by them or that they are influenced by them. So basically, it would essentially have to be convenient for people to find some way to, interact with that in a nonviolent way. Yeah, there would have to be the technology present or the means present essentially to make there be a more preferable version of something to do.
Yeah, or particularly raise rates or something like that, so that they're paying for the complaints that people are having. Just something to signal to them that their behavior isn't accepted.
Wait, so you're saying an insurance company, your insurance company, if you're the guy that smokes weed, raises your rates because you're smoking weed?
Well,
what if you just don't pay for insurance?
Contract. Yeah. Well,
what if you're a guy that just doesn't pay insurance?
That's a good question. Yeah. What would be the case there if I say I'm smoking weed, Andrew, and and they're gonna give me, I got 4 premiums that I could pay for. and all of them are relatively high. Now there's a cheap one, but it's just not to my standards. So why would I go and pay for either one of these policies when I can just go uninsured and then live with my consequences if something were to happen?
Or even then, if we're saying that there would be a competition of insurance agencies, why wouldn't there just be an insurance agency that's fine with you smoking weed?
Oh, I'm not saying
that's true too.
It could be a prerequisite that they have insurance and that it's written into the policy that this doesn't happen here.
You're saying like there's a prerequisite that you must be insured to live in a certain area?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because again, that would kind of like be a problem with like land ownership and sort of like who is claiming what when it comes to your ability to, you know, live somewhere without being, you know, told what to do. And that is essentially like the spirit of anarchism itself, right?
Yeah. But I mean, like if you go to an insurance, if you get an apartment nowadays, they have basic rules like that. Like make sure you keep your, because I've seen these, make sure you keep your computer up to date and this and that. I mean, it's not really applicable, but it's more of a just cover your ass kind of thing. So I'm not saying that it's mandatory. I'm just saying that these are the kind of things that they do behind the scenes.
So I guess, you know, we could almost wrap up like this conversation here, because I see we're kind of going with it, you know, and how many like little things we could get into with it. But sort of my question to you, and if you want to ask one to me after, you can do that as well. But my question to you would be essentially, how is this not creating the exact same conditions that we're in currently when it comes to enforcements of law? And basically, like, as a part of that question, not like a new question, but like, you know, why would that be preferable?
Well, I mean, law is an application of money, right? Is you can every time that you spend in an environment that has the same money supply, you're contributing to the same conversation. So if there's more than one money supply, then you have a better chance of having, you know, more diverse options.
Okay, sure. So do you have any anything else to add to this part of it, or do you want to just go on to something else?
We'll go on to something else.
Sure.
Fine.
All right. So I guess what we were going to get into, I know Zach mentioned it earlier, was like egoism in Stirner, and something with that was that basically I had No Way Jose on actually last week, so you should go check out that episode if you haven't already. But one of the things we got into was Max Stirner. Yeah, thank you. Having seen you, Zach, because I've seen you mention Stirner a lot, I think probably on Twitter and maybe on Discord. I'm not sure about Discord, but like I've definitely seen you talk about him more than once. I'd like to know, what are both of your perspectives on him?
You want to go first, Andrew?
No, you go ahead.
You're dude. Well, my perspective on Max Stirner and egoism is, I don't know, honestly. Basically, you put me on the spot. You go first, Andrew. Wrap of mine, put me on the spot.
Right? Oh man. You know,
I kind of set it up too. I mean, I was saying it for a minute. I said Max Stirner for like a minute there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I could give a perspective on Max Stirner if you guys want me to, because this was actually, again, another conversation we had last time. And basically, we could also talk about Rand's egoism, or like Aristotelian egoism, and the differences between them. But essentially what I see is that, like, sort of even Jose, when he was talking about egoism, he was sort of saying, well, you know, there are obviously better choices to make for yourself that are more aligned with your self-interest. But it became like almost him thinking in the sense of like Rand's egoism at that point rather than Stirner's, which according to, you know, like Rand's criticism of him and what I got from reading Stirner was that it's almost like not that you necessarily should, but that it is perfectly fine for yourself to just act on a whim in every case, like constantly act on a whim, which would be problematic when it comes to like actually being fulfilled in the end, you know, like at the end of your life, and actually having a good life. Because if you're just acting on a whim all the time, you're living very hedonistically. And, you know, maybe some people will be like, well, what's wrong with that? It's like, okay, well, you could, you know, actually be miserable doing that. And that's not necessarily something that I'm not saying that there's, you know, this standard that every single person will react to it the exact same way. But I think generally, you know, if you're living a life in which you're just drinking yourself to death, that's just because you like drinking every day. And you're like, well, I like drinking, so let me act on a whim and drink. Okay, next day, let me act on a whim and drink. If you do that every day, you're going to end up miserable just because your health is going to suffer because of it. Like, there are actions in which you probably should, if you care about your life and you care about living a quality life, actually take a look at your actions and say, will this be conducive to a better life for myself?
Yeah, I mean, but that's the brilliance of it, in my opinion, because people are people. We're all creatures of our own habits, so you're not going to stop anybody from doing what they want to do. So, I mean, if they want to smoke a joint every day, every morning, wake and bake, or they want to drink until their liver shuts down and their kidneys no longer can filter and they just keel over and die, why not? I mean, if they want to try to do something, I don't know, try to build the largest skyscraper or come up with some sort of creation or paint the most beautiful picture that mankind has yet to see. Something different, something beautiful. I mean, that's the brilliance of humanity. So, and that's the brilliance of what we can do because we're creatures in our own habit for what choices we make. So that's basically where my established line would be is you make life how you make life. So you can be miserable, you can be happy. I mean, either or, it's your choice. So are you going to create something? Or are you going to do nothing and sulk?
Yeah, and I don't think there should be insurance agents sent after people that are drinking themselves to death. But the thing with that
I mean,
is
maybe.
the thing is, I was just saying, like, it is probably best I mean, I would say, yes, it is best to like actually act logically and think about your decisions. And that is sort of just the idea that, the people who do want to drink themselves to death, they see it somehow as in their self-interest and will do it. But, if they think about it logically, maybe there is a way out of doing that. And maybe like, I would assume I would put money on the idea that there is a better life for them outside of that.
Well, let me ask you something. What do you think? Do you think that it's a better conversation to do that day in and day out, or do you think it's better to build a conversation for, say, he had kids, and consistently build a narrative of health towards the kids' future? Not putting a lot of adversity on them, giving them a lot of positive experiences, motivate them, educate them. You think that would be preferable, or just out doing whatever you want to do every Saturday?
Right. But the question would be if you were acting on a whim, and I mean, you guys can challenge this if you don't think that was Stirner's intent with saying it, but basically the idea that your will becomes like above all. And even if you think that, your kids are valuable to you, either way, if the drinking's more valuable to you, you may as well do it.
Yeah, you're not going to care.
You guys get from it, or
I mean, if the drinking is more, go ahead, Andrew.
I think that creates more adversity for the child than the positive experiences. And
I mean, I agree with that. I'm asking about your interpretation of like what a Stirner type would say about that when it comes to the view that maybe you should just do what you like actually, or I guess is like what is first in your mind, like as far as like if drinking is really something you have an urge to do, you may as well just do it.
Well, if you have an urge to do it, yeah, but there's significant consequences to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that again just comes to the rational aspect of it. That like again, somebody like Rand would say, in my opinion, would be like, okay, well, maybe that's something that you shouldn't do because again, you're going to negatively affect those in your life, and you're probably going to create a lot of trauma on them, and that would result in a worse overall connection between you and your loved ones or people that are at least close to you in your life.
Whereas with the more Sterner philosophy, you could look at it as the kid's dad drinks till he's knocked out and slobbering all over himself, and I mean, what does the kid take out of that for, right? I mean, there's two things: either I'm gonna live what I experience and what I've seen, the culture that has been enmeshed in me because my dad is an alcoholic and a shitterbrain. Um, so I'm going to become an alcoholic and a good for nothing, or I'm going to take that and I'm going to grab that adversity, and I'm going to kick it to the curb. I'm going to fight right through it, and I'm going to make the choice to not foresee the consequences that obviously I see with my dad. So,
yeah.
So.
I mean, do you guys have any other takes on Stirner aside from that? Any other understandings of him?
Well, I mean, there is this quote
Sure.
that Andrew likes to always bring about.
Yeah, I wouldn't knock everything Sterner ever said. I think there's like, and I mean, we could probably, I could reply to that after, but I mean, like he said, like a lot of things as far as like, what spooks are, and like it comes with like religion or like, the state, and those things are true, right? But there are other things that it's like, okay, well maybe, like morality is actually something you should consider.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this though. So with this quote that Andrew always likes to bring it. He brings it up a lot. It's like a special quote. But the men, how's it go?
Men of the future will fight for rights we don't yet even. Men of the future will fight for rights we don't even miss.
So what do you think?
I'm bastardizing the quote, but that's basically it.
So what do you think that means to you?
I'm being interviewed now.
Yeah.
I would say like, okay.
What?
I don't know. Maybe it's an interpretation, like, you could get out of it being, people sort of like want more than what they have now, essentially. Like, maybe there will be people that don't miss certain rights today, but like, even then there will be people today that are fighting for rights that people in the past themselves didn't even miss. Like, we ourselves may say like, we want the state to end, but people in the past may have just said like, well, we just don't want to be enslaved by somebody, like, directly, like a person. So, I mean, I guess there would be, in a sense, like, I don't necessarily know if that was his exact intent with saying it. Maybe it would be the sense that like rights don't matter or something. But to me, what I'm hearing from it, my like actual interpretation, if somebody random were to say that and I had no context other than like, like if I had no context of who the person was, I would say something like along those lines that I guess you take what you have for granted.
Yeah. I mean, what are rights anyways?
I mean, rights, like, well, I mean, if you were to give an exact definition, it would be something that somebody cannot do to you. And that would come from your nature and exactly the nature of interaction between people. And because there are scarce resources, essentially, it would make it so that if you are to claim it first, you are the owner of it, and somebody cannot therefore come in and say, I am the owner of it now, because that would be contradictory. And I mean, that pretty much, I know it's very libertarian centric, but that essentially we are correct on rights. I would say we are right on rights.
And then shorten it down. I mean, shorten it down, leave me be, let me live, I'll let you live. That's your right. There's your rights right there. I mean, everything else is material.
Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a long-term, rights are like a long-term playbook of things that people can go back to and practice when it becomes in fashion. But then once it falls out of fashion, people forget about it, and they say, basically what that quote, the one I was kind of bastardizing, was saying is,
I mean, I could almost take that as some reactionary saying this, like some reactionary guy that's like, well, in the future, there'll probably be people that, want, a double transgender surgery.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about like in the United Army, people used to be able to carry their firearm on their side while they were doing their patrols and stuff like that. Now they don't even have that right to be armed when they're in the Army, unless you have very specific permissions to do so.
A bit off topic from that. It was what we were just talking about before that, but like sort of like, it's like, how people say like conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. It's almost like, I imagine it as some guy saying, well, these transgenders take for granted that they have all these rights to get, injections. They're fighting to get, the reverse of those injections after they get those injections. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm an old-fashioned conservative. I like only the one injection.
I deserve to transition 6 times, damn it.
Yeah, no.
And carry 4 guns.
I'm a conservative. I remember when it was only 5.
So, well, you know what they say though, right? The liberal today is the conservative tomorrow. Is that how it goes? So it's just a never ending effect, I guess.
Yeah.
There's always.
I mean, what would you guys say is the explanation for something like that?
Honestly, a little bit for me, a little bit education, indoctrination, culture. You don't have to be indoctrinated by the state. You can be indoctrinated through your family or your neighborhood community. I mean, a lot of it has a lot to do with culture. And but when it comes to like the status aspect, a lot of it has everything to do with everybody wants changes. Everybody wants more. And then the next generation, as they're coming up, they, how do I say that? The better train of thought is more people kind of conserve themselves, kind of slow down, kind of become more tame as they get older. So that's why you'll always have a younger generation coming in that's more liberalizing, more let's go, let's change, let's have 6 transitions and no guns. I mean, it sounds like peace and utopia, no more, yeah, whatever. But they're always tackling for that extra like right that takes away another right, obviously, because that's just how the government works or the state works, because it manipulates us. But there's always that next generation that wants more, and then the older you get, you're just like, whoa, settle down. I got what I need.
We got against the state. Is that coconut water? Yes, it is coconut water. I love coconut water. I love drinks that are natural and good for you, and they don't necessarily have to be plain water. I mean, you can have milk, you can have coconut water, you can have orange juice. I mean, freshly squeezed juice is incredible for you. Fuck the people saying it causes insulin resistance. Not true. Thank you against the state based. I appreciate that. But yeah, when it comes to conservatism, what I was going to say is that it's not really like, I mean, I guess, technically like, conservatism doesn't really have a definition as far as what it is, because there are so many different things you can assign to it. Just as there are so many things you can assign to right, left, liberal, whatever, because the state likes to play a game in which, the conservatives of today will support something that the liberals don't and sort of like pit them against each other. And to have that, you essentially need to have shifting values, because it's not at the exact time that the state needs the exact policies to come in, like, because the state operates based on, not just support of its policies, but it operates on inherent incentives. And basically, it looks for people to support what is within its incentives at that moment, or what's within its needs at that moment. So basically, what they're looking at here is, groups of, people that would be labeled conservatives or liberals, and saying, okay, well, we kind of need them to support, like, less taxes or more taxes. And then, the other groups needs to support the opposite. And then basically the politicians that would be allowed into office, or the ones that would be selected, would be the ones that reflect those values. And so with that, it becomes tricky to define what conservative and liberal are. It becomes tricky to say, like, is this just a non-political ideology? And the thing with it is, I would say there are certain values that could be considered conservative that I would say have been lost over time that I do value myself, like, let's say, family, but not institutional authority, respect for authority, like when it comes to like the police or something. I would not call myself in any sense a conservative on that. And so, I don't think it's necessarily the case that, first of all, I don't think things are going to go left forever. As you can see, there are things where there are reportings that Gen Z is more conservative, and that, there is more support for somebody like Donald Trump. I think things might flip around when the state has different needs. I think there might be shifts, like reactions to sort of like, I not really radicalism, but I guess the direction the state may be pushing things in, but then the state will try to correct for that. And that may just cause a different sort of problem in and of its own. But yeah, pretty much like my point there being is that, like, I don't think it's necessarily something that's fixed, that, like, conservatives over time will just become more and more progressive and more progressive. It just depends on what the state needs people to be propagandized to think.
Well, that's what the state does. That's politics. They use it to divide and conquer. So it's been millennia. So go ahead, Andrew.
I was saying, a social pressure. That's always been a go-to for state interests.
Yeah. Let's see. So I guess just other topics that I wanted to cover. Let's see. got this here. Yeah, so I guess we can actually go into this because this is something we were just discussing. It seems you guys focus a lot on the current state, lowercase s, of society on your show. And so one episode that I mostly recently enjoyed, and I actually mentioned this to you guys before the show, or I mentioned it when I think Andrew was away, but Zach heard me. It was the Ezra Wyrick show. And, you know, I've had him on my show as well. He's a good kid. I met him at YAL as well at Revolution. Nice guy. And you guys just discussed societal expectations. So I guess sort of, I mean, we can continue on this conversation, if anything, by saying, like, what do you think causes people to act in a manner that they do right now? Like, why are people still overwhelmingly bound to expectations and rules that are set in place?
A lot of it's fear. A lot of it is fear, and then the other portion of it is, yeah, I mean, stupidity, in my opinion. So, but I mean, that just goes to the education aspect, back to culture, back to family or lack thereof. I mean, when it all comes down to it, I'm like, look at families nowadays. Look at families. Probably the last 30 years, we've lost that two-parent household. Like there's some, in some families there's no parents. The kid is raised in foster care, going in and out through the system. I mean, you don't have that adjustment to where they can be stable. So you kind of lose. We've lost something because there's no stability. So that's my take on it.
If you're even more unlucky, you get raised by Shane Dawson.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen that photo, but yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if you had anything to add, Andrew, but I would say, like, I agree with you, Zach, that like these things are instilled in people. And yeah, I mean, it's a big thing. Like, and I mentioned this because we had a conversation, and, you know, I kind of spoiled it right there by saying it, but, you know, there will be a conversation on you guys' show with me on there. But basically, what I was saying when you asked me about this question, and I think it's actually something that you essentially brought up, but I could kind of just expand upon it further by saying that basically these things are instilled by necessity because the state wants to have these sort of drones or these like tax cattle that they are essentially propagandizing from birth to say, you know, this is the way society operates. This is like the state is an inherent part of society that prevents chaos from taking place. And, you know, essentially it's the glue that keeps society together. It's what gives you your roads, you know, who would pave the roads if not for us? Who would essentially make it so that you can live such a comfortable life as you do today? And basically you wouldn't want that to be gone, would you? You want, you know, to have an orderly society. You want to have a, you know, wealth and all this stuff. So this is what the state provides you, despite there being so much unrealized because of what the state has suppressed. And, you know, basically the state causing it so that, you know, our level of material success, I suppose you could put it, or actually like what we have is far lower than what it could be, especially like, you know, in people that are living like third world countries right now because of what, you know, the US and other states are doing to them. But point being there, essentially, like, you know, people have been told, you know, this is the life that you're supposed to live. This is what you're supposed to do. This is how things are supposed to be. And so when people are told that their entire lives, they don't really rebel. They don't really think about, you know, what else could there be? I mean, there's a point where people get fed up when things get worse, but when things aren't that bad, people don't care. I mean, people are fine with the lives they live, honestly. Like, maybe they have problems. I know, like, you know, working a 9 to 5 is not a good thing for most people. They don't like doing it, but, you know, they put up with it enough to the point where they're not going to take any sort of action. Or even if they hear about a way to do it, maybe some will, but not everybody would. Most people would be like, okay, well, there's a risk to that. I don't want to lose this life, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean,
not to mention what their own states are doing to them, of course, as well. I was just kind of saying, like, you know, in the sense that, like, the reason, well, you know, if anything, something like a state like North Korea, you know, like, all states would be North Korea if they could be. All states would do that to their own people if they could be their own people, quote in quotes. But, you know, they can't economically. And I mean, there are other states that probably would have better material, conditions if they weren't bombed by the US, like in the Middle East. Like the Middle East, for example, would not be as bad as it is had it not been for the economic necessities of other states. I'm not saying people would be living in luxury or people would be in a better condition than we are, but they would not be living in as much turmoil as they are currently.
Well,
unless you're in Afghanistan.
Well, the long-term effects of World War I played into that too.
Yes. And just like what we say in our show, Andrew, we've mentioned it so many times. If it wasn't for World War One, we wouldn't have a central bank and creating new money and have all these excess taxes and paying off the interest of those same bullets from 1914. We're still paying off World War One. Congratulations.
I think, the thing with that is like, okay, maybe the central bank happened because of World War One, but it was inevitable that the state would engage itself in war in general. The U.S., I think, was a little early to do it. It would have done it eventually. If not World War One, then maybe it would have gotten involved in World War Two, and at that point set up a central bank. It was bound to happen because this is what states do. I mean, this is how states run their economies. And basically, at a certain point, they essentially need to move on to using fiat currency as a centralized monopoly of, the currency that is used in a society. So, they need to have this debt-based system in place essentially to continue running. And so they'll all do it. It's not like something like, oh, the US is just going to shut down its central bank tomorrow because there's enough support for it because we all said end the Fed. The US is going to keep that up until it doesn't need to keep it up. And it probably will need to, but we'll see. Let's see. First central bank was set up in the 1600s. And I would say that's like, at a certain point, states begin to implement things that they have not before, maybe because there is an actual ability to do it now, or just because there is some sort of discovery in how to oppress people more.
That's the interesting tidbit because it was about the 17th century, but I think our central bank system now is the first. The modern edition of it is the first time where it's just so efficient, or so it says. I mean, maybe that's the technological aspect of all the annihilation. 1694, good.
So let's see. I guess this is a point that you had brought up to me that we could do for the other episode, but we didn't end up doing it, and I told you we could do it. But this is sort of on topic, I suppose. Why is the LP retarded?
Since it's politics, man. They still think politics. They think that they can campaign and they can rah and set up organizations. Vote for me, vote for them. Whatever. The choice is yours. 2024, it's the most important election ever.
I'm sure it will be, honestly, because I've been through too many this is the most important elections ever, and through my experience I've found that it never really is the most important election ever. There's always somebody that arises that could literally be the next dictator, the next Hitler, and we really just need to stop them. So every time, or there's somebody else that maybe is going to end the republic, and we need to stop them.
There's this clip.
Let's see. So again, real quick, Against the State says, I think there are some decent candidates for president this year for the LP. If you can name which ones you think are good, go ahead. But Zach, you were saying something?
I agree. There are some, if you really look at it, there are some good candidates that are LP. Like, they have some good views. I do like Lars. I do like Mike Termat, which we had on our show. Like, these guys have some great points. They bring it. They're smart as a whip. And they it all comes down to our very favorite idea. Leave me the F alone, basically. I'm not saying I'm not gonna go out there next year and vote for Mike Termat or anything, but I will say I agree with him on a lot. So I do agree there are some good candidates out there for the LP this year.
I think within, the view that politics is legitimate. First of all, if you're advocating for any sort of policy as a libertarian, like let's say there are some that are like, okay, well, this is why we need a minarchist government, for example. They at that point have legitimized politics as a valid institution, and basically they have no real defense against why the state is illegitimate, or even why any other policies would be illegitimate if somebody is like a minarchist, for example, because what they're saying is that, well, it just comes down to my preference of the government being smaller. And, maybe they say like, okay, well, the effects are better, but at that point they don't really have a defense against why, a genocide would be ethically wrong.
Yeah.
That's all subjective. So, what one says is murder is another one's reward. Kill 6 million Jews and I shouldn't. I'm allowed to say that,
I'm gonna
right?
take that as a statement of advocacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I was gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just take over now.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, even the ones that, claim to be, anarchist, and I think this is another point we can get into with the LP. So basically, the minarchist ones don't have a defense against the state, and they pretty much just have to say politics in general is valid, and basically there's only personal preference at that point is why they're libertarian, quote unquote. And then you have the ones that are anarchists that say, oh, well, what I want to do is roll back the state to the point that there is no state. And the problem with that is that they fall into the, the idea that, like, oh, well, politics is actually something the state gives us so that we can change the state and so that we can vote away the issues, when that is literally itself just propaganda by the state to make you think that investing your time and resources into changing the state is the solution, as opposed to counter economics or technology, like improvements in technology as well. We got some chats real quick though. We got Against the State saying, hold on, I gotta get the chat. Okay, I like them all, but Joshua Smith is good.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Josh is a good one too.
I think, as a guy, like, not as a candidate, but I think he knows what he's doing, like, as far as, how he talks and like I'm not going to say he's unintelligent, and I'm not going to say his strategy is not, essentially witty, I would put it. But yeah, I mean, still, like, I have displayed the reasons as to why I don't give my support to any LP candidate, but sure. Let's see. Yeah, Mike Termat has a really interesting background as economist and cop. Cop. Does he regret what he did?
I don't know. Ask Clint Jacobs.
That would have been the first thing I asked him. Do you regret what you've done? Because he's had to. Let's see. We got Patrick Quinn saying not voting LP is a violation of the NAP. Well, I will not vote at all. And I think, the NAP is perfectly intact whether I vote or not, honestly. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Mlih? I actually do have a stream. I'll ask you guys after this, but I have a stream where we discuss it with Filthy Heretic and Ignis, and there's a pros and cons, to each one saying like, okay, well, this is the reason Mlih should be voted for, or he's a good candidate, or he's actually going to do something that's Ignis saying that, and then Filthy Heretic saying, well, no, this is all bullshit. Here's why. And it's pretty much similar to my perspective. We don't stick on it the entire stream, but we actually do make a lot of points, especially in the first, I would say, like hour or so around. So I'd say, if you want to check that out. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Mlih, guys?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I mean, we've been bitching about this for over 100 years. Finally going to have somebody who's been listening and is going to actually try to implement it. So you can't say anything too serious right off the bat, but he seems to be consistent in what he's saying, and I'm hoping it's going to work.
He does actually. I mean, it seems like didn't he actually retract it? Yeah. There's like 9 ministries left, and there was like 20 something. Yeah, so he has done that. He's also he said that he was gonna. Yeah, he just started. He did say that he was gonna remove Argentina off their garbage of a currency, worse than ours, and go to the dollar. Of course, a lot of libertarians, I guess, are throwing a fit over that because the dollar is absolute trash too. But you got to put it on his perspective, though. He's just trying to do what's best for Argentina. So he's done some good things. There's definitely potential there. I'm not going to say that I'm going to put my eggs in a basket for the guy, but for the people of Argentina, I hope it does something.
So counterpoint to Mlih being a quote unquote good politician, if the term actually exists. Yeah. So
he's still alive.
Yeah, well, the thing is that like the state has times where it actually does need to make cuts. For example, even with the Free State Project in New Hampshire, what you'll see is that you'll see Governor Chris Sununu, who's not involved with it, brag about the fact that taxes were lowered in New Hampshire, yet they are making more as far as income when it comes to collecting taxes. They were making more revenue when they taxed less because it's just an economic thing. That's how the state operates. It looks at it and says, okay, well, if anything, we could allow for people or the market to actually work and allow for less predation in a time where things need to recover. But once things recover and they're better than they actually were before, we can come back in and actually take more than we would have had we just kept suppressing these people. So my worry here, or my, at least, my concern, and what I would like to express to libertarians who find Mlih to be like this good, guy that's going to save Argentina, would be that like there are times where the state actually does need to make cuts. So let's say like it has a bloated bureaucracy that is actually going to cause an information problem, and essentially it's going to cause the economic calculation problem is just going to take place. Well, you could have somebody that comes in and is essentially the cover for why these agencies need to be removed, so that there isn't this such an information problem. So for why the state needs to remove these, but the underlying thing is that the state is actually operating more efficiently when it does these things. So, and I'm not even saying that it's like an all or nothing thing. Oh, he should have just removed all the agencies. What I'm saying is the problem is, what would pass or what would not pass is dependent on what the state views is necessary for itself. So these agencies were taken away because the state was like, okay, well, we actually would do better off without these. If Mlih said, I want to get rid of all agencies, that wouldn't have happened. He could have said it all he want, but the state would be like, well, all the politicians within it would just kind of like coordinate because of the incentive structures in place and basically say, well, we just can't do this.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, is he controlled opposition, or is he one of them, or you just don't know.
What do you mean by one of them?
Yeah, could it?
Well, I mean,
he was at the WEF about a decade past. Accordingly, he was never asked back, but he was there.
All right, let's see. We got Patrick Quinn saying, you know what I meant? Oh yeah, because the LP violation in the NAP, like going for it. Let's see. Any port in a 150% inflation rate storm. So basically, like now that there is 150% inflation, like it is best, or you're saying to this commenter against the state, it's best to take any course of action at this point that'll be beneficial, essentially. So like, does it really matter what the reason he's doing it for or not is? It's like, oh well, it's the people are better off for that being the case.
And they probably are. I mean, they're better off now than they were a few months back. I mean, we'll see what the near future has in store for them, but they can disappear if they want to and go on their own regard and go subvert the state doing their own thing. Maybe they'll all go homestead in Chile. That's my hope.
He's saying the dollar is an imperfect solution, but it's better than using the peso. I mean, the thing is, the state, like the reason for doing that would essentially be to attract business, to essentially have a currency that is not about to crumble. And, there would be, in that sense, like when the state is doing this, beneficial effects for people who are living under it, but it's not because it's beneficial for the people that the state is doing it. It's because it's beneficial for the state. And so like, okay, fine, the state was going to do it anyway. It's good that people are living in better conditions when they are, but the fact that they're living in better conditions doesn't mean it's because they're actually closer to freedom. It just means that the state at that point has, it would essentially be like saying, like, somebody has control of a thermometer in a room, and it is blazing hot right now. You are sweating to death. And let's say that person's like, fine, I will turn down the thermometer because I'm hot as well. And then finally you have the relief. It's like, yeah, it's good that guy has relief, but this guy still has control of the thermometer. So, the guy that has been suffering still has zero control over the thermometer. It's not as if he just gets to control it once he's cooled down.
If you're in a stressful situation, you jump in the ship from one port into another, you still got a captain, you still have to follow his orders.
Yeah, essentially. Let's see. He's still commenting. He says Argentina already has 200 billion USD in circulation because they are practicing counter economics and avoiding the state mandated exchange rate. I mean, good if they are. I mean, like if they're actually not enforcing, but if they're engaging in a competing currency practice, that is good. The state will probably erase the progress by implementing the US dollar, because then it'll just be legal tender there. But if they want to do Bitcoin now that the USD is in place, then all the power to them if that's what the people want to do. Let's see. And so against the state says, so their economy is already de facto dollarized. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So let's try getting people to use Bitcoin now. Let's see about that.
Well, sort of like what El Salvador did like 20 or something years ago. They dollarized, and I mean, it was still they were still a mess, but what was it back in 2017 or 18? They decided they actually made Bitcoin their official currency. And then there's other policies that have gone into effect the last couple of years that where I guess society's a little bit better. They're a little bit more comfortable than they ever were. They're still not in the greatest circumstance, but I mean, and nobody's free. I mean, for what they should be or could be, but they're more comfortable than they were 20 years ago, 5 years ago, actually.
El Salvadorans, it's up to you to use Monero now. Get rid of the state implemented Bitcoin tyranny. Use Monero.
With only one wallet.
Exactly. Yeah.
With
exactly.
only
So
one
every time the
wallet.
state's adopting something, do the next thing over. If the state is adopting the peso as their currency, use USD. If the state adopts USD after that, use Bitcoin. And if the state adopts Bitcoin, use Monero. There you go. The state will never adopt Monero as far as I can tell.
Cash.
Yeah, well, there you can use that too, but if the state adopts that, then you have to use Monero.
How about Z? How about Zcash and Dash?
Zcash. Ethereum.
Ethereum.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, I don't know. If you know, for some reason, if it comes to it, I will use Shiba Inu. Okay. So yeah, I guess like one last question, if anything, that I actually had like planned to ask you guys, it has to do with your show because, you know, one of the primary words you use is legacy. So if anything, I think we could get into its own conversation if you guys have that much to say on it. But what's the importance of legacy? What does it mean? Like, what does it mean to you?
Well, we picked it up from that Nomad Capitalist program. He's talking about legacy countries and stuff like that, and like United States, Canada, where you have these more artificial or rigid structures of what the narrative is for the country and what they do, and then you have the option to stay there and keep contributing to that, or you can go to a new area where it's a lot easier for you to, you know, express your own interests and stuff like that, you know, business practices and your own cultural preferences.
And then we kind of went from there. And then I look at it on the basis of building something anew and trying to maintain something that's ours and hopefully everybody that we're able to reach to, like, let them build off of something, acknowledge that you can build your own legacy. Like we may become like we used to like to say this in our earlier episodes, but like we would always say, like, we may be the legacy right, but you have legacy rights. Well, you do. You have the right to live and be left alone and establish your life any way, shape, or form that you want to live. So
you're right.
To build that legacy for the most part.
Your rights predate that of the government.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are adopting that like egoist sense of like just live for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah. And then I mean, like Andrew said, positive rights don't exist. So I mean, we all live in the negative. I mean, you're born to live, find some sort of fulfillment, create a legacy, and then you're in the dirt. So I mean, you gotta build it.
Now, what if I say I'm entitled to universal basic income?
Well, then you're gonna go out of helicopter.
We're very hoppy in on this one, and we're gonna set up a Chilean compound.
Look, I mean, are the helicopters funded by the market or not?
Well, I mean, that's communist, so I guess so.
Yes. Only 3 companies though.
3 companies instead of 1.
Yeah, only 3.
Yeah.
Each
at least it's not a monopoly.
I find that to be a ridiculous argument because, like, today you could say, like, with corporations, like, oh, well, at least it's not one corporation owning everything, but it's like, well, the state has control over how corporations operate, and like essentially that corporations exist in the first place because of the state, because of, you know, the regulations put in place and the incentives that the state has created for firms to essentially just continue scaling up indefinitely, and, you know, like, essentially giving them market preference once they actually are bigger entities, you know, whether it be like eminent domain or any sort of grants or bailouts or what have you. And so, you know, if you're talking about like, okay, well, you know, there's a competition between Walmart, Target, and Publix. Well, you know, when you think about it, like, you know, these corporations aren't, you know, like maybe they're at odds, you know, as far as like, you know, okay, you make like they want you to make one grocery purchase with them instead of the other. But when it comes to like, you know, the anybody's ability to enter that market, the state really just helps them there. That is something that they have essentially their own like ownership or domain over, I'd say. Like they are essentially their own like mafias or like essentially their own mobs.
Yeah, for the most part, they're I would say they're their own little they're little they're gangs. They're like the little gangs on the street. The government's the mafia, and the CEOs of these corporations are capos. So yeah, it's like one big gigantic protection racket ran all the way up to the top. So
I would say
and the
that's a better way to put
corporations
it.
get their
Like the state is the mafia itself. They are the gangs. Like the corporations are the gangs. Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So that's how I would put it.
That's what?
That's why they call it the Piggly Wiggly. Sorry.
Look, I mean, we, you know, three helicopter companies that I don't know about that. I don't feel safe about that. That is just, you know, that's too much power in too little hands.
I mean, it's Walmart, Sears, and is Sears even exist anymore? I think they finally.
I don't know.
No, they got they capitulated after they got bought out.
Well, I was gonna say I saw Sears, but if anything, that building got demolished like in the time that I saw it. So yeah. No, but I mean, like on a serious note, as far as that, like when it comes to something like, let's say, you know, because we're kind of getting back to the enforcement, I guess, discussion. If we're talking about like the helicopter stuff, like essentially, what gives you the right to enforce, you know, what you view as correct on somebody else? Kind of like, how does that, you know, would you say that conflicts at all with the egoism aspect of it, or is it almost like you're going back to the idea that like might makes right, and therefore like your will is just your will, and you can do what you want?
I only if it's in your domain, your space, and somebody is coercing, aggressing upon you. I'll say I live by the moniker FAFO. So fuck around and find out. I mean, if you want to aggress on me or my family or anybody, any one of my loved ones, I mean, you're probably gonna get knocked out. But for the most part, enforcement, I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow, actually. That is kind of, I mean, that's tough to figure out. How do you enforce away from your own property, away from your own domain, without the state or a gigantic private corporation that is run by robots?
It's almost like you need one or the other to actually enforce things that are not essentially things that you're defending yourself over. Like if it's not a case in which you are, you know, preserving your life and your property in a proportional manner to what somebody else is doing, it's almost like you yourself are becoming a state. And I think that's Benjamin Tucker had a quote similar to that essentially for somebody to act as an aggressor would himself to be acting as a state.
Yeah,
which, I mean, I don't know. I found that quote pretty compelling.
Yeah,
and he has a point, because anybody has the perplexity to become worse than they're just worse. I don't know what else to say. I mean, anybody can become
premium.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, I do have that conversation coming out with you guys. We did record it before this, but I think there is, you know, there's more that we talked about that wasn't talked about here. And I don't want to like go on and just start spoiling all of it or start getting into those discussions as well. But I would encourage you guys to check it out when it comes out. I don't know the exact day it's coming out next week, but I'm sure, first of all, you guys are going to post it in my server. Zach, I know you will, in self-promotion. I will make sure to mention everybody on that. I'll tweet it out as well. But for now, do you guys have any closing thoughts on what we've talked about on the episode? Honestly, it's been great having you guys on, though I don't want to get into any spoilers or anything. I kind of want to wrap it up like you guys did around the hour, and keep it short and simple with that. But, you know, any sort of closing thoughts or any statements or any thoughts on the episode, any shout outs that you want to do, anything like that, it's up to you guys.
Well, first off, that episode will be out some point this weekend. So
All right.
yeah, hopefully
Sooner than I thought.
Yeah, so it'll probably be Sunday release. So when it'll drop. So that's the plan. Anything for you?
But hold on, does the week start on Sunday or Monday?
It starts on Monday.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. So or wait, hold on.
No, it starts on Monday. Just go.
It starts on Monday. So, Andrew, you got something to say, man? I know you got.
I appreciate you having us on, and I hope everybody has a good Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. And I don't know, Zach, were you wrapping up something before I did the whole spiel on Monday?
Yeah, it was. No, it's been a blast to have you on, and then for you to invite us on. So it's been fun. So yeah, we again like Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you advertise, whatever, even if you don't celebrate the holidays, enjoy the season, enjoy the end of the year. So, I mean, and thank you again for having us come on, shoot this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good, sort of swap we did there where we kind of like did one and then the other. If I had invited Ignis on, then we could do a little swinging, but no, we didn't have him on today. But I'm gonna love when he hears that, and then he's gonna be like, "What are you talking about me on the show for? What are you saying that for?" But yeah, that's pretty much my piece as well. You can find me at Twitter, Civil Offense, and I mean, pretty much this show is streaming on Rumble. It always does at the same time, and pretty much I leave a link in the description for you to check it out. Just make sure to check me out on all platforms, and remember, first before I say it, make sure you contribute to Ross Ulbricht any way you can. Free Ross. I really want to see that guy free in his lifetime. It would be incredible. But in the meantime, please do just contribute whatever you can to him. I mean, even if it is just for him to eat every day well and do whatever he does with his prison commissary, just anything like that, letters to him to just keep his mental state good, all of that. But remember, guys, that civil offense is the key to winning. Thank you.